And I think from a Gongos perspective, I think about why do we think innovation is important. I think as Christy sort of alluded to, there's so many changes that have occurred with regard to consumers and technology and how people live their lives today. It only makes sense that we try to figure out how to learn from them in new ways and new engaging ways. And so, we're kind of like along the same path as you guys, just kind of looking at it from our own perspective, and I think that's been a helpful strategy as well.
Let me piggyback to something that Sigal said. When we first started talking about a virtual shelf, after one of our first conversations, we did go and explore other options. So, we still had to kind of answer the question for ourselves: should we innovate and build something new, or do we take something that a current supplier, a package that's already available? And we quickly got to a place where we said, it's probably going to be a situation where it's going to be advantageous for us to innovate with you all. Partially because if you look at some of the packages that are out there, many of them have limitations to the number of SKUs that they can handle. And if you're a traditional CPG company, I don't know if there's beverage companies or chip companies or whatever, you can throw tomatoes at me, but even if you have 100 or 200 SKUs, that's a challenge. 500 is a challenge. And if you think about a card display, we have thousands of cards that are on display, and we joke a lot internally about it. It's only greeting cards, and how hard can it possibly be? But if you spend a few minutes thinking about it, we have models, a series of models that take it down to giving you the specific card for a specific pocket in a specific store. So no two displays are the same. And when you look at managing a model line that is thousands of cards long or large, you look at different options that are out there, and the opportunity to develop a product that is going to meet our needs instead of requiring our company to adapt to a package that's already out there became very attractive for us.
Okay, and I guess the other question would be, both Hallmark and General Motors are very large corporations. Why not try to develop something like this internally?
It would not have gotten done. I can tell you that. I mean, anyone who works for a large company with an IT department, it's not the fastest thing on earth, right? And for several reasons, right? I mean, one of them is just our project would definitely not be an IT priority, right? They have their own priorities of things that they need to do internally. And the second thing is, honestly, we needed to get something done quickly, and we wanted to have the flexibility to keep improving on things as we developed this platform. And again, it would have never happened with our internal IT system. Every time you want to change something in the system, you have to fill out a form, a request form. It goes through I don't know how many people. We would not be able to get this continuous improvement process that we needed to have to develop this new platform.
Bill, how about you?
Well, my first reaction is, Okay, so show of hands out there. How many people, if you're developing anything in a research group, would get support from IT? And that would be the answer. I mean, Sigal said it, and it's true for Hallmark as well. Developing a tool like this would simply not be a priority for our IT department. So, I mean, it wasn't even a consideration for us. At Hallmark, our IT department requires what they call a statement of work for anything, and we would still be filling out the statement of work today if we had to go through that process.
Okay. And I guess maybe that would be a good transition to, let's just talk about the process that each of you kind of individually went through with us, and as you guys kind of share, I'll kind of share the research supplier perspective of kind of like what it was like to go through this process. But Bill, maybe you could just kind of talk about how did this process go for you, and just kind of talk a little bit about how that went.
Yeah, so I said initially that some of our business requirements had changed, and specifically if you think about some of the innovation that we're doing, innovation product, and the business need to test some of that product before we ever go to retail. And so we were already doing some testing online of those specific SKUs, and we were looking for better ways to do it. And my challenge to my team was, how can we get closer to retail? How can we get closer to retail? This is all great, And we were doing things like showing consumers, forcing consumers to look at SKUs and evaluate this SKU. Do you like it? Do you not like it? That kind of thing. And what was kind of going on in my head was, it's great that we're forcing consumers to look at this stuff and tell us if they like it, but that doesn't mean it's going to sell at retail. So the closer that we can get to retail and predict that retail performance, the better, right? So a virtual shopping tool where we can show somebody a shelf and say, go shop for a card, basically, and they can pick up a card, they can put it back, they can put it in a shopping cart, and go through that process that they would as close to retail as possible. In my opinion, still gets us the best possible answer without actually being in retail. So we kind of have that mindset going into it. Innovation comes from anywhere. Gongos approached us and said, hey, we're thinking about this. This might be a good project. What do you think? And so we sat down together and independently and said, what can this be? I mean, we kind of went through this dreaming phase. And spent hours just kind of saying, if we did something like this, what would it need to be able to do? What would it look like? What would we want a consumer to do? And then the next step was, Gongos kind of went away and developed the first prototype and kind of came back to us. And I think the first prototype was actually in PowerPoint, just kind of a flash file of this is kind of what we talked about. And we're like, yeah, this is it, but can it do this? And then we spent a few months just iterating back and forth saying, this is great, can it do this? This is great, can it do this? I think we actually went through a couple of different versions of it and changed platforms even at one time. All with the goal of, one, getting a good read from respondents, and two, giving the respondent a good experience. So one of the presentations I sat in yesterday was talking about how do we go from just, clicking on different radio buttons to fill out a survey to having a more interactive and entertaining experience for a consumer. And this is an example, I believe, of one of the ways that we're going to do that. We're going to give them a virtual shelf. We're going to give them an exercise to go through, go shop for a card. And we'll be able to tell everything about their shopping experience in them.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, one of the things that was really helpful was this idea of let's kind of identify what this ideal state would be. If we could get to our dream solution, what would it be? And then, our process was then to say, okay, well, from a technical standpoint, what are the platforms that are out there that we could, use? And we actually did some searching around too, like, do we really need to develop this ourselves, or do we really need to start from ground zero and say, yeah, we really need to create something that doesn't exist? And that's ultimately the decision that we made as well, that, the existing technologies out there really weren't going to support it, and we actually kind of embraced a relatively new sort of emerging browser-enabled technology that helped us get to where you guys needed to go, because it was really clear that there's some really high expectations and needs. So we did our best to try to address it. But I think it was also this process of, we know ultimately where we want to go. Let's kind of figure out what step one looks like, and then this idea of, all right, from step one, before we even launch this thing, let's go through a couple iterations, usability studies, and really just kind of make sure that we really understand from a consumer standpoint, is it delivering the experience that we both needed it to be.
Part of our innovation process at Hallmark is instilling the concept of migration maps. So you kind of say, where are we today, and what is that ideal dream space that we want to go to, that aspirational space, and then you kind of map out steps along that path to reach that aspirational space. So I think that having that innovation process kind of instilled at Hallmark, and I'm sure at Gongos as well, and kind of having that framework of what is our aspirational space, and then what are some steps along that path to get there, was an important part of the process.
Right. I think, Sigal, I think you probably agree, a similar sort of process was going on with regard to late 2006, early 2007, with regard to what became our Meta Community products. So talk a little bit about what the process was from a GM perspective.
It's interesting, there are similarities and differences too with the process you guys went through, right? Because we had a very good understanding of what we wanted this to be. And it was based on our previous research, our previous experience with these online communities. And we just felt that, again, we wanted to get the same type of flexibility and tools that we were using outside of the online environment, now in the online environment. So I think we knew what we wanted to do, and it was a matter of, the first step was really to find a research partner that would work with us in developing this new technology and the new tool. And for us, we found a great partner with Gongos because of the experience we had with this particular vendor on both the online world and outside. This was a supplier that really understood what our requirements were, the way that we worked, what kind of deliverables we were expecting, what kind of flexibility we needed. So we found a partner that was willing to work with us on this innovation. And from there on, we started having several meetings just discussing how do we go about building what we want to build, and leveraging the capabilities that the supplier had and the requirements that we had on our side. So we had several meetings to get to the end point. And one of the critical things, I think, is the fact that when we had something that we felt was more or less what we needed, we actually just launched it, and just went with it. And in this process of utilizing this tool, we kept learning and we kept evolving. And the going back and forth and the continuous improvement, I think, was critical. A lot of the learnings we got kept coming from requirements and requests that we were getting from our internal clients that, they would say, well, can I do this? And we would have to say, no, but let me see what I can do, right? And it's little things. For example, I mentioned that one of the main things with this new platform was getting to a much larger community so that we were able to get quantitative surveys done with a large sample that would then enable us to look at different data cuts. And you can imagine doing that and the amount of responses that you get, right? So when we use that for example, brainstorming ideas, our clients, the first time that we did it, our clients came to us and said, well, do you have a way to help us prioritize all these different ideas? And our response was no, but let us think about it. And working with Gongos, then we ended up developing and utilizing the rating system where we have the panel members or the community members rating each other's ideas so that you don't have to read 5,000 ideas, but you read the top rated ideas. And again, this is how we started learning. It was this iterative process of continuous improvement.